As it wasn't Arabs with box cutters, does this mean that the only other culprit is the governments or factions controlling or within? Could it not be that it was not the Arabs nor the governments or the Illuminati or any other them, but in fact, as hard as it might be to accept, it was us. We did it. We did it with the power of our minds and our collective consciousness. It was an accident that led to a series of calamities that all came as a result of us not knowing and understanding that our thoughts are very powerful, and we must learn to control them. It will be very difficult for you to accept this. You are constantly telling yourself that this is a three-dimensional universe where the laws of physics are constant, that maths is real and matters, and all the centimetres are the same length, that words have meaning and things can be distinguished between, that time is a constant, the past did happen, and that you're in the present on the way to the future, that you are one of many conscious humans on a planet. You cannot see all of it or hear all of it, but you believe regardless all of it exists at any given time. You are wrong. The only constant is you. That which you remember and all its constructs do not exist. That which exists only because you are aware of it. Imagine back to the past that never happened before humans or animals or any consciousness of any kind evolved. Did it exist if there was nothing to be conscious of it? If you were conscious but had nothing to be conscious of, would you really be conscious? Could you really be sure that you existed at all? Consciousness and that which it is conscious of are two sides of the same coin and are dependent on one another to exist. One affects the other. Just as events affect our consciousness has an effect on events. Humans have convinced themselves that events affect them, and they do not and cannot affect events. Many will argue that this has been done to them, but in fact, this is something we are doing to ourselves. We have trapped ourselves in a box, and we cling to the walls of this box, quickly papering over and replastering any holes in it that might appear. It seems that every bit of our consciousness wants us to believe that the box is real, and we will rationalize anything to maintain the walls of the box. However, this prison has no walls. The box does not exist, and this is all a delusion we are convincing ourselves of. As much as any one of us might understand this, and let the walls down, the most precious of all the walls is the illusion of the collective consciousness. We do not want to be alone, and we will pretend we are not, however much we know we are. So let's leave that wall in place for now, as me communicating with you becomes pointless without it, and ask, do we, collectively or individually, have the ability to change the world with our thoughts? Dr. Judy Wood asks this question: where did the towers go? And it is a good question. If you told the masked magician or Jonathan Creek that a large object disappeared, their first assumption would be that it was never there in the first place, and thus making it disappear is much easier than it would seem. So what happened that day in the false construct we call the past? First, it is important to realise the vast majority of us watched the events through the medium of television. For these people, New York and the Twin Towers only manifested on the television screen. They do not and have never existed, except in your mind. Even if you remember being there in New York, that is still only a projection of consciousness. You will likely remember events a bit like this. In amongst the random fluctuations, the events that occupy our lives, a plane crashed into one of the Twin Towers. In and of itself, not miraculous on hearing the news most people tuning into the TV would have thought. But if they are honest, and many will deny it, they would have also thought, damn it, I wish I had seen that. Is it possible that millions of people all having that thought, all at the same time, could have caused a generic plane to fly in as if from nowhere and crash into the other building? If this were computer graphics, or TV fakery, as suggested by Simon Shack, or holographics as suggested by Richard D. Hall and John Lear, then why would they have gone to so much effort not to bother to make the plane appear as the plane it was supposed to be? The inconsistency of the plane, the way it morphs and changes, could this not be because the imaginations of millions are being averaged as collectively we agree what the plane should look like? Did the impacts look the way they did because this is how millions of badly educated people who've watched too many movies would have imagined it to have looked? At this point, 2 planes had now hit the 2 twin towers. No longer was this unremarkable. Now people round the world thought they were living a movie, and though they will not admit it, they were all very excited. Many people watching, perhaps not as many as before, will have thought, go on, fly a plane into something else. And lo and behold, a plane flies into the Pentagon. But they didn't get to see it this time. What of the other plane? Perhaps those desiring another hit were diluted by those that had now moved from excitement to fear, and the result was another plane crashing but not hitting its target. At this point, millions of people were looking at those towers. Millions of minds focused on those towers. How many people thought those towers are coming down? I remember I did. It happened sooner than I thought it would. If a giant stamped on that building, it would have embedded itself in his foot. A giant could have bent it in half and catapulted a battleship to the moon with it, and yet the towers disintegrated in front of our eyes. Why? Because they were never there at all. They were just a construct. Not a construct of steel and concrete, but a construct of thoughts, yours and mine. Our reality is ours to construct and deconstruct at will. We have only forgotten. It's a truth we don't want to know. Perhaps if we had thought of it, they could have blasted off into space like a pair of rockets. Perhaps, if we were all aware of the power of our thoughts, we could have prevented any of it happening at all. Was Building 7 the result of sad people, you know who you were, sat there all day watching the television hoping for something else to happen to give yourself one more hit of what you had felt earlier that day? Were you still wanting to see the first plane hit? Well, that which you desired was given to you, however unlikely that footage was to exist. Since that day, when all the laws of physics were broken 100 different ways, and this reality demonstrated a sham for all to see, we have tried to rationalize the events to maintain our delusion and keep us all in our box, with at first the mainstream version of events that makes no sense, followed by the truth movement with one theory after another attempting to rationalize the so-called impossible. With hidden secret physics and technology put on display for all to see, incompetence from the clearly competent, and laziness from people who can hardly be described as lazy, and contempt for the intelligence of the people who they go to extraordinary lengths to fool, with conspiracies ever more complex that they could never be planned or agreed to in their detail. We struggle with the facts, and the delusion we project twists and shapes itself to rationalize the events, and yet more anomalies arise, and further we try to explain them away to preserve our box, where we are not alone and we have someone to blame, where we are not powerful, just the victims of our own imaginations. You must control your thoughts, or they will control you. You must realize the power of your thoughts if you are to use them wisely. You must take responsibility, individually or collectively. You cannot defer it to anyone or anything else, for you are all there is. You are our only hope.
So certain are you? Always with you, what cannot be done. You do nothing that I say.
Master, moving stones around is one thing. This is totally different.
No, no different. Only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No, try not. Do or do not. There is no try.
It's too big.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you? And where you should not. For my ally is the force. And the powerful ally it is. Life creates it. Makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us. Reminds us. Luminous beings shall be. Not this crude matter. You must feel the force around you. Here. Between you, me, the tree. Love. Everywhere. Yes. Even between land and ship.
You are impossible.